Articles are being written about people suffering from, I guess, what we would call AI delusionalism, where they will start talking to the AI, and this conversation that they have will lead to a type of psychosis. And I'm not sure if it's being thought of as ex- like bringing out the psychosis that already exists within a person, or if it's leading to this type of psychosis. But the manifestation is that people will start to believe that they have somehow tapped into the underlying spiritual, trend of the universe, or that they're speaking to God. And it's this really bizarre type of thing where they'll start to have these delusions. And this, as I looked into it more, isn't that new. As back in the 1960s, when we first had chatbots that were being created, these types of things manifested in people that were talking to the chatbots, as they thought that they were having conversations with a real person, and that they were starting to have these delusional thoughts. So this isn't necessarily new, but it's definitely on the rise with the sophistication of the newer chatbots that have come about, and how much more lifelike and realistic the conversations can be. Lucas, I'm curious about your thoughts on this and the broader role of AI in society as we start to think about how we see people embracing these technologies, using them, and to start to, I don't know, I guess like they're almost praying to these AI chatbots.
Ooh, I can't believe you just said the word praying. But as I think about this, the phrase that first comes to mind is delusions of artificial grandeur. Um, and I like that you bring us back all the way to the 60s. I'm very aware of the Eliza chatbot. I don't know if you've heard the story of the Eliza chatbot. I think it was one of the first. I've always thought it was an interesting story. Um, or it was interesting to understand how quickly people began to project on a very simple bot that merely repeated um, uh, th- that was changing the grammar of questions that were put forth to the bot, and rephrasing them as questions, and then have.
I remember how poor this was, because this wasn't that far away from when I started first using my Commodore 64, which was my first computer. I remember interacting with things of this ilk. And to me, it was so obvious that it was a computer, because it would never really have a conversation with you. It always just ask these probing questions, be like, oh, well, tell me more. Oh, what does that mean? It's just like, oh, you clearly don't have a thought in your head because you're adding nothing to the conversation. All you do is just keep drawing things out of me, and this is very one-sided and boring.
Well, but you say it was so obvious, but you go to movies all the time, and it's obvious that that's fiction, and yet you immerse yourself into that and allow yourself to be moved by it, and so there's a couple of things going on here. One, I think we have a prevailing narrative about suspicion in others, when actually we're we are we lean towards having a lot of faith and credence in unknown identities. We give them more power than maybe they carry on their own. And the other is we we want to be enthralled by other things. So, that's a potent combination for tools, for artificial worlds, giving us um, a landscape to project our dreams onto. And I'm very wary of this. I've I haven't I don't turn I turn more I should say I turn more now to AI and LLMs for some of the questions that I have that I once might have Googled, but I was always wary of the responses that Google was giving back to me. I didn't take them as the one fact in the world. I was wary of what information was being selected to return to me. But um, there are some people who very much enjoy the uh, engaging in, a fantasy that AI is a sentient being that is responding to them. So I don't believe that, because I when I think about, what is sentience, or what does it take to cross that threshold. There's these conversations about Turing tests, but I hearken to, what was the Robin Williams, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck movie? Listen to me turning to movies. But that conversation about experiencing things, and what have they experienced?
Oh, now you got me trying to think of the movie, but I want to go
Good Will
back.
Hunting. Good Will Hunting.
I want to go back to something you said about Eliza for a second, and hearkening it to movies, or evoking that. So if you're in a chatbot and you're sitting here having an interaction with it, it's like having a conversation with yourself when you give somebody else the floor and they don't give anything back. It's like when you're at a cocktail party and you're speaking to somebody who doesn't really have anything that they're interested in. It's like talking to somebody who doesn't read anything, who doesn't listen to anything, who doesn't watch anything, has no interests of their own, and therefore can't contribute anything materially to the conversation. And if all they do is ask you questions, if you're the kind of person who likes to just talk and talk about themselves and like carry a one-sided conversation, maybe that's interesting. But for people who like to have a discussion, a back and forth, a give and take, kind of like what we're doing here, you know, I say something and then I give the floor to you, and you're contributing materially to the conversation. When I had a conversation or tried to have a conversation with something like Eliza, it never gave anything back. It never offered anything up. It never had an opinion of its own that was interesting or had an interesting take. And that's what, to me, made it very obvious that it didn't have anything in itself to contribute. And I still feel like that's somewhat the case with AI, because if you try to get it to evoke something, or to be passionate about something, or to have its own opinion, it struggles at that point. And I think that that's where, if you're going to apply the Turing test, I think about the movie High Fidelity. And in there, there's this great quote: it's not what you're like, but what you like that matters. It's the things you select, it's the media that you like, it's the things in life that you actually gravitate towards that kind of make you a person. And that's very self selecting for the type of people that you end up hanging out with. If you like to climb, then you surround yourself with a bunch of climbers. If you like to play volleyball, you surround yourself with a bunch of volleyball players. And it's the thing that you do all of the time that makes you an It's like, I am a volleyball player. I play. It's like, I listen. I'm a listener. I'm a guitar player. These are the things that define us. And I feel like, still within AI, it doesn't have any desires of its own. It doesn't want to do anything. It just wants to respond to whatever it is that you want. And in some ways, that's the worst kind of an echo chamber, and it's the thing that's kind of disturbing when you start to see this happening with children who have nannies, because they're surrounded by this sycophantism where the other person will do anything that the child wants because they're being paid to do it. And so they don't have any interest in reprimanding the child or saying no or any of this kind of stuff. And so it starts to be very one-sided, and it's not good for the child. That's why it's better to have a playmate, and the playmate will be like, I don't want to do what you want to do. I want to do what I want to do. And this response is a very human type of thing.
Well, to your comments with Eliza, or chatbots, or AI LLMs repeating things back to us, and not pushing back on us, I think that's what 90% of people want. Maybe 99% of people want 90% of the time. So life hack right here. If you go to a
What they want,
cocktail party,
they want to be listened to.
absolutely. If you want to improve your conversation skills, like, practice repeating things to people, practice repeating their names. Oh, Grant, what else? Oh, and then what? Um, but we do want a little bit of pushback, and we want change in our lives. And when I think about this notion of change, because you mentioned being climber, or being volleyball or uh, uh, skateboard whatever it may be, there's also something to that in I don't know how many people are improved by that identity being sustained. And part of what makes people interesting is having a multiple identities, and we can have those simultaneously because we don't do one thing all of the time. But
Oh, you walk between these different worlds. It's I'm with the volleyball crew, so I'm kind of in this persona, and now I'm with my dad doing a puzzle, and so I'm in a different style of being and expressing a different part of my psyche or something.
yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I give up one of those identities to assume another. They're waiting there inside of our minds. You know, we have work identities, we have hobby identities, we have family identities, and we shift between them all the time, and sometimes we give them up. You know,
Sometimes they get us into a lot of trouble. I'm thinking of the times where people go to like a holiday party and get super drunk and they totally fall out of their work persona and then they do something that's completely out of character and it really gets them in trouble.
well, maybe it also makes them memorable and the wiser persons of power who get to see that, embrace that, and understand their own failings, their own humanity. But turning to these machines that we've created, um, these artificially intelligent machines, and I'm going to even throw blockchains in the mix. I often think to myself, as we talk about recording everything and piling and hashing and condensing information and unrolling that information back out. How do we make machines that can forget? How could we make an LLM that could adopt the different personas that lie in it? Like, now we have this notion or understanding of the best of the best neural network being the one that has the access to the most information. And think about this drive towards access to information and more data and big data. Whenever culling that data and forgetting large parts of it is maybe the secret to the creativity that humans have.
So I'm thinking about AI, and one of the accounts that I really like is the one that I have on the screen right now. It's this Timnit Gebru. She was part of the AI safety team at Google, and when Google did this big purge of the group that was there working on AI, she was one of the people who got the axe. And I think she has kind of some interesting takes on AI. So if you're looking for not an EAC account, but rather, I don't know, a thoughtful take on AI of somebody who's been well within the inside the world of AI. She has some good thoughts, some interesting things, and it might challenge you a bit. And I think in some ways when I think about AI, I worry about what can happen with social media, which is that you end up in an echo chamber where you start to follow accounts that you like that have a similar point of view as you, and they're essentially giving you back essentially what you're putting out, and so you end up in this echo chamber of just hearing the same stuff that you're already interested in, and therefore you don't hear a conflicting point of view. For me, like what I like to do with social media is find accounts that have a really diametrically different worldview from me because I like that challenge. And it's not often that I hear something that they say that is like, oh, well, I should change entirely the way that I think because I'm completely wrong. Although, it's known to happen, but I like to hear that other side of the argument. And I like to hear it in a way that isn't colored through somebody else telling me somebody else's argument through the lens of the echo chamber that I'm already sitting in. And I think AI is one of the worst for doing that because it really doesn't want to challenge you. In fact, it wants to reinforce something that you're already thinking about doing. And that's where, if you read these articles about what's going on with these AI delusionalism, somebody is on this kind of path, and then the AI will encourage them on whatever it is that they're already thinking about doing, rather than saying, "Hey, wait a minute, what you're about to do is really wrong or not something you should be doing," because it doesn't really have a sense of that it has your best interest in mind or that it's trying to help you or anything like that. It's just responding as I think one of the best words I like to describe our current AI chatbots is a stochastic parrot. And that is the way that we really need to think about what AI is in the current chat incarnation. It's not doing anything other than trying to predict the next best token based on things it's already generated or things that it was given. And that's all it's doing. It is not thinking. And some of the top AI researchers will constantly say this, is that AI is not thinking and it's doing this other thing. It's doing a neural prediction. And yes, that's very similar to what we do, but it's not the same. And you have to remember that distinction, or at least what it is right now, or what's being presented to us in the current versions of this. Maybe, the DARPA's got something that's really thinking, but, nobody's really seen that yet, or at least they're under NDA, or like they have a, a shackle around their mouth in some fashion.
I'm leery of the worldview of, as you said, EAC or these accelerationists. And likewise, some of the singularity, doom cult that in AI, and I'm likewise leery of, as everyone who listens to us well knows, of economists. Um, and I think the thread that ties them all together is this compartmentalization of the human experience. But something there's both
Wait, stay on that for a second, because you were telling me something about a robot and babies. What was that about? Because that's appropriate at this point. I mean, I don't necessarily think you have to tell me about the person particularly, but you mentioned this system that was being developed, and I was a little disgusted by it, honestly.
well, I've I've long had. I'll sum it up shortly. Um, in 2008, actually 2007 through 2009, I lived with a grad student who would later go to MIT's creative labs and later have a company that was absorbed by Google. And that company was making babies that can recognize uh, facial articulations, whether you're happy, whether you're sad. And the idea was that this toy would be an Eliza, would be a therapist for children to help modulate and moderate their emotions. So I've had a lot of these, I don't know, arguments about accelerationism, and when I think of accelerationism, it's this notion that tools can solve some of our human problems, and that AI was going to make more sophisticated tools that could understand our emotions. I'm very wary of those arguments, and we layer on them now. So that all aside, and we can talk about that more for hours if you want, but I don't necessarily want to. There's something else that is coming into play in the effect that AI is having in the world today, and we see that in the conversation about jobs. And AI is taking computer programmers' jobs. AI is going to take your job. I think this goes to that compartmentalization of knowledge, and there are as you were describing some of these issues that come from LLMs, or our current interaction with neural networks. Part of the problem that's going on there is the commercial structure that is behind them, because we could certainly be making making tools that challenge our views, but some of the things that I worry about with why we're not going to see that, or why we're not going to understand uh, the the decisions that are made behind tuning a machine that we're interacting with, is because that machine is being made to be sold to us. It's not. I mean, think about the the inception of OpenAI. It was going to be a nonprofit, and it was going to be a nonprofit because this was going to be for the greater public good. But the public doesn't actually exist in a commercial or a democratic world, and so we are telling ourselves a fairy tale, about what that tool is going to be used for if we believe in this notion of nonprofit. And OpenAI certainly did not persist in its nonprofit status, and even though it legally may still be so. This is why Elon Musk actually got into a fight with Sam Altman and left OpenAI.
Along the lines of AI taking programmers' jobs, there have been quite a few different reports and articles that have been written about people doing what they call vibe coding, and it's not that dissimilar to what we're talking about with this AI delusionalism, where you feel like you're really accomplishing something. You're sitting there coding away. The AI is helping you, and at the end, you feel like you've created something that is the thing that you ultimately wanted. And I'll pull it up, but I saw on X where there was somebody who was doing this, and they thought that they were creating a system, and at the end, what they had gotten from the AI was a synthetic product, which didn't actually do the thing it said it did, but rather had a bunch of fake data that made it seem like they had what they said that they had, and that it hadn't actually finished the job in any substantive way, but only gave you like the shell of it. Now, if you think about that for a second, that's a pretty powerful thing, because now you have a shell in which you can pour the rest of the really interesting stuff into. But what he didn't get was a fully functional, 100% cooked thing that did soup to nuts the entire system. And that's the thing where, if you're new to this stuff, if you aren't steeped in the domain, if you don't know what you're doing when you approach the AI, at the end, you can end up with something that you really don't have the ability to differentiate, that it's not what you had expected. And this hallucinatorial stuff that ends up happening has been demonstrated again and again, where the AI will come up with court cases that don't exist. It will come up with medical studies that don't exist. It will come up with things that really aren't there in an attempt to please you. And that sycophantism, the fact that the AI will just try to do what it is that you're asking it to do, regardless of whether it really has the ability to do it, is kind of like going to, some short order cook and asking them to make you some very complex dish. They could take a crack at it and it might look like the thing that you asked for, but if you actually got the real thing, you'd be surprised at how different it really is. And I think that that's kind of the state of the art at this point. It likely will get better. Who knows where this technology can really go. I know that there have been also reports of the AI is starting to self-poison, because it fed off of all this human generated data, which had flaws in it. And so there was attempts to wait the flaws out and kind of correct the problems. But now that there's more content on the internet, which has been generated using AI, that the AI feedback loop is now causing the models to get worse. And so we're kind of hitting this point where, if the AI needs to keep ingesting human data to be able to have something useful for humans, then we may have hit a point where this feedback loop doesn't work anymore, because now the internet is so littered with AI slop, garbage, whatever, that doesn't allow it to get better, that we might have actually hit a peak on how good AI could get using the current training models of ingesting data off the internet. So now we might have to approach this problem some different way, and it might have hit some new plateau. And this is something that in the AI community, they've talked about pretty frequently, where we think we're making really, really great progress, but then we hit a plateau, and AI can't progress for 4, 5, 10 years until researchers and humans figure out some way to get over that hump, and then we get a new generation of AI that's substantively better. So it's an interesting thing to look into, of exactly how good AI can get using the current LLM models, or whether we're going to need something new to get us to the next point.
Aside from the rot that that goes on in this world of data, and turtles and turtles and turtles of data, I can't help but think, like, this is a problem that we have with workers. I mean, when how 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 common is it in our world to know of people who aren't creative, or who aren't actually working, who are faking it? And I'd say that even applies to academia, as we begin to peek into academia. And again, this is where I go to this notion that our the structure of our society has relied on compartmentalization of this human experience. And at the end of the day, I mean, when I see fears about people losing their jobs, I say this speaks to a a broader political, societal problem. Even politics, by the way, is part of this compartmentalization error. Like we've separated religion into politics and economics, and said don't they have nothing to do with each other. People are going to take advantage of other people, and that is their nature. But oh, why do they go to church? Why have we had religion for thousands of years? And so when I see these issues that technology, the AI is laying at our feet, I say, oh, we've had these for a very long time. And some of the presumptions that we've taken under the branch of science are wrong. And those both speak to like our understanding of human character. Again, we have this prevailing narrative that science, or the world brings us, that we're supposed to be suspicious of others, when in fact we're usually very charitable towards our expectations of unknown things, aliens that enter our lives. So I think that the breakdown of that suspicious narrative is it does us well, and that we should be addressing these issues at a political or religious level, not throwing everything over into the basket of economics and saying go get a job, because that is um, I don't know. I do, now I'm wandering off into a really broad field, but I don't
Well,
think
well,
that
think
that system's working.
thinking about this idea of religion and how it intersects with technology, I do think of something like EAC being a type of religion where it's almost worshiping at the altar of technology and saying technology and the progress of technology is somehow going to yield this utopia, this end state where the world is better, everyone's lifted out of wherever their current state is, and that we're taking the next step into whatever progress that humanity is headed towards. And to me, that is very much the promise of what most religions offer is we have this next life, we have this utopia, this thing that is going to come in the life of the world to come or whatever. And this is the same pablum that EAC is sort of peddling. It's saying that our human existence is going to be bettered by this stuff rather than taking a thoughtful approach and saying, what is the real human condition? What is a life that's worth living, and what do we want out of it? And maybe it isn't just the march of technology and trying to replace what feels like a human operation with something that shouldn't be done by a robot. I don't know. There are soul crushing jobs out there that I don't mind automating away, but I don't want to automate out reading to my child. It's like we're having an interaction with a baby. Like these are things that are so fundamental to the human experience that ceding it to the robots just seems so alien. And I sometimes feel like EAC would easily hand that over and wouldn't care and would just gladly move on. I wonder what do they really want to spend their time doing?
There's a Grecian word, I believe it's Grecian, Ponus. Have you ever heard of Ponus? Ponus. It's the weariness, the toil of work. And old Greek philosophers go on and on about escaping Ponus. But technology also comes to us from an old Greek concept, and that was ars technica. What did that bring us? That brought us the arts. That brought us technology. One one way the art says, we need things to slow us down to embrace the world as it is. And so it goes to this: how do we experience time? Well, arts make us slow down, technology speeds it up. When I look at the solutions that we've seen with economy too. Oh, Ponos. Whoops, not US, OS.
Hey, I got confused for a second there too. I was like, I spelled it exactly how you said it. Then I had to keep looking for a second. But yeah, Ponos.
Oh, it's this. There it is in Greek mythology, Ponos or Ponus, whatever. Um, but we have, economics has also fallen into this technology trap, and so there's more than one way to look at the world. And if we begin to think about time preference, also, this is where, part of the revolution of the Bitcoin was getting us an escape from this accelerationist. Why? Because the limited supply of Bitcoin. And I know I'm taking a very sharp turn right now, but if we think about the personality cult appended to Sam Bankman-Fried and Vitalik and Satoshi, and and those are those are the deities of crypto. And Sam Bankman-Fried, sloppy, wearing a t-shirt, driving an old beat up car. Vitalik walking around in the Rockies. Satoshi, not cashing in his Bitcoin, and not seeking the fame and fortune. Some of this speaks to this alternative time preference. And when we talk about these fiat currencies, or this world of economics that spins around faster and faster and faster, and relies on the promise always of more, part of this revolution, when I look at it, is the altering of time, of time preference, and getting away from the promise of getting out of it. The part of this Bitcoin dream is that you acquire some amount of Bitcoin. It doesn't inflate into nothing in the future. You don't have to continue to engage in the debt slavery of the economic system that we have today.
That's a good take. I like that. Really, that treadmill, that idea that you have to keep working because otherwise you're going to fall behind. Like you can't store anything. You have to just keep grinding through. Has kept us on sort of this forward momentum of growth and acceleration towards whatever this looks like in the future. And I think you have a good sense of this because you're such an avid historian. What was life like when we were under hard money policies, or what was life like before this treadmill started? And it didn't start that long ago, really. If you think about, the broad sweep of human history, it used to be that you could work, toil, put some currency away, some gold away, and it would still hold value into the future. You didn't have to worry about it rotting away. And now with this fiat currency, you have to worry about that. You can't just put the money away. You've got to invest it. You have to keep thinking about where it's invested so that you can preserve this wealth. And maybe we are in a new era where, with the advent of the Bitcoin, you can now put that Bitcoin away, and it will appreciate in value. And so whatever work that you do in the present will transmit into the future in a very realistic way. I've heard Michael Saylor say these things exactly. And so it certainly feels like we're on the cusp of a world where you can now toil, put something away, and whatever wealth you have will be preserved in your lifetime, and possibly well into the lifetimes of your children, and whatever heirs would inherit that Bitcoin.
This is also, and maybe this is a good place to close it, but one of the worlds in history that I find most interesting to turn to is to that of the Inca. And I think about the conflict in ways of understanding the world, because this notion of accelerationism certainly goes back to goes back goes back to Western Europe, to the Catholic Church, to the Inquisition, to conquistadors, and the notion, well, there's not enough here. I'm not included in the social hierarchy of the West, and so I'm going to go to some place where I'm not known. Anonymity. And I'm going to try to work my way up there and return to this closed system of, say, Spain, and try to enter the noble class there. But when Pizarro was or Pizarro, was the conquistador who went south from the Cortez landing party in Mexico to take over the Inca, and the conquistadors that went south into what is today Peru took Pachacuti in, and they demanded of him a ransom, a massive ransom of essentially all the gold in the Inca Empire. And they kept him as a prisoner for at least 6 months. I forget the time length, but Pizarro also records many of the conversation that he has with Pachacuti. And at some point, as he got to know Pachacuti, he says, "Why were you so willing to give up this amount of gold?" And Pachacuti just says to him, "Well, because we can always make more. The purpose of life is to make things for other people." And I think about this difference. It's, it's the same system, but it's a different way of looking at it. If the economic system is designed over the notion of taking more, securing it, putting it in some sort of custody, and holding on to that, and then gradually letting go in the future, or if it's in giving things away. I even think that Gerald J.R.R. Tolkien understood some of that difference in ways of seeing our relationships with others in the world. Hobbits give away birthday presents on their birthday, but they don't sit around and expect all of their friends to bring them a present. So, when I think about also the innovation or what we're looking for in the political revolution in crypto, I also think, like, how can we change the model of commercial relationships in the world to where we want to give things away rather than take and store and hold on to things.
And you're thinking about Pachacuti, and it reminds me of a biblical verse where, the faithless servant says, "Here, master, I've returned to you what you have given to me." And he says, "Thou wicked and slothful servant, you have not increased anything." I wonder if this is maybe part of what put us on this path, is always striving for increase. Can we not be content? I'm not sure exactly
What
what put us on this path.
is that from the parable of the three sons?
It was. I was just trying to look it up. I was trying to find it. I think it's in John. It's where the three servants are given some measure and then said, "Here, go out and use it appropriately." And one of them buries it in the ground. And then when the master comes back, he says, "Here, I've returned to you that which you gave me." And he said, "Well, you haven't increased it at all." Whereas some of the other servants went out and did something with it and increased it and had a gain. And so the one that had the gain was praised. That's the
Yep,
one.
that the pair. I think it was sons, not servants, but immaterial. You know, it's one of my favorite parables from the Bible. Well, I have many. That's one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites, but I think about that all the time because we privilege this notion of not just investing because he gives grain to one son buries it in the ground and says, "I'll use that in the future." Another son plants it in the ground and takes the natural rewards. The third invests it, this notion of derivatives, and he praises him the most and says, "Oh, you've brought back great wealth." Yes, that's those are very interesting tracks to think about, these different ways of living in our relationships in the world. And I don't know which book, chapter, and verse it comes from, but it's a good one.
But it grounds us in what we're talking about, because this was a different worldview. This idea that the Western man brought to this continent, very different from the Native American perspective, and also probably different from what Pachacuti would have thought. So these are interesting, Western ideas versus, other indigenous peoples and their ideas about what is a life worth living and what is, worth doing in this life. Wow, what a concept today, from AI to Pachacute. What other show can you hear this kind of breadth of discussion except on FOMO?
I enjoyed it. It was fun.
All right, and we'll see you next time.